Buddy Baker, who has a lot of sentiment among veteran observers, as one of the real threats.
Oh, we have a problem.
Is blowing a tire.
This was the end of the era of speed for NASCAR. After this crash, NASCAR rewrote the rulebook requiring all NASCAR engines to be fitted with restrictor plates to limit speeds. But what happened in the years leading up to this restriction? What caused NASCAR to crack down on speed so suddenly? What happened to the era of speed? This is where the era of speed begins. On this fateful day, Buddy Baker would achieve NASCAR history by successfully completing a lap of Talladega Motor Speedway at an average pace of 200.447 miles per hour in the famous Dodge Charger Daytona. Baker became the first person to complete a lap around Talladega at 200 miles per hour plus, as well as allegedly hitting over 220 miles per hour in the straights. Only introduced a year before in 1969, the Daytona and Superbird are considered the final two of NASCAR's first Aero cars, supporting the claim with a rounded nose and an astounding 23-inch tall rear spoiler. These two cars, along with Ford's Torino Talladega and Mercury's Spoiler 2, made up NASCAR's Aero Warriors. And then NASCAR banned them. All four Aero cars only lasted throughout the 1969 and 1970 seasons, to which NASCAR ruled to limit the engine size of cars with aerodynamic features to only 305 cubic inches or 5 liters for the 1971 season. This essentially made Aero cars irrelevant to manufacturers because they were no longer competitive. And sadly, that marks the end of Aero cars in NASCAR. For the context of this video, although the era of speed did technically start in 1970 with the innovation of Aero cars, I will be mostly focusing on the 80s. The 80s were not only the beginning of NASCAR's rise in popularity, but also the average speed at which drivers were managing to achieve while traversing the super speedways within the Cup Series. The 80s are considered the era of the fastest NASCARs to date. These cars were capable of displaying record-breaking speeds close to that of IndyCar, while the average NASCAR weighed close to 3 times the weight. Ever since Buddy Baker's record-breaking flying lap a decade prior, the speed in which NASCARs were traveling was creeping closer and closer to 200 miles per hour. From 1980 to 1981, the average qualifying speed around Talladega was averaging around 195 to 196 miles per hour respectively, foreshadowing the next 5 seasons to come. In my eyes, the real beginning of the era of speed comes 2 years later, which began a 5-year stretch of NASCAR's most impressive feats of speed. Yes, in previous years, qualifying laps at Daytona and Talladega were in the upper echelon of 190 miles per hour, but none were quite like 1982. The era of speed subtly began on April 29, 1982 at the 1982 Winston 500. And little did anyone know that in the coming years, records would be made and broken. The qualifying speeds for the pole winners were all well above 199 miles per hour, but none were to the likes of Benny Parsons. Parsons would take the front of the Winston 500 with a blistering 200.176 mile per hour qualifying lap speed, breaking Bobby Isaac's previous record of 199.658 miles per hour. Wait, hang on. What does that say? What? While researching the 1982 Winston 500, I discovered that Bobby Isaac had a 201.104 mile per hour lap record, with no further information. I did some digging and I turned up practically nothing. I believe that Isaac's record was not done in a sanctioned race, at least from all the information I was able to scrape together. It seems to have been done similarly to Buddy Baker's lap record during some kind of test, but I still don't know for sure. Despite the discrepancy, Benny Parsons would become the first person ever to record a 200-mile-per-hour qualifying speed during a sanctioned NASCAR event. This feat would start a snowballing effect of increasing speeds to come. The 1982 season saw NASCAR's first 200-mile-per-hour qualifying time in history, and this year saw the closest 200-mile-per-hour qualifying lap speed at the 1983 Daytona 500, posted by Ricky Rudd at 198.864 miles per hour. The speeds at Daytona alone had seen a 2-mile-per-hour increase since the previous year, but another record would be broken on the banks of Talladega. This year was the first time NASCAR saw two separate instances of 200 miles per hour, both of which were held by Cale Yarborough. Cale Yarborough was known for many things, but in the 80s, he had one of the fastest cars on the grid, as shown by his pole speeds. Now leaving his prime after winning 3 consecutive championships in the late 70s, he still proved to be a major threat after winning the Daytona 500 that year. However, the year after, Cale Yarborough would achieve a more impressive title. Cale Yarborough is just one of 5 drivers who have won the Daytona 500 twice in a row, and while doing so, he was also the first person to break the 200-mile-per-hour barrier at Daytona in qualifying. Both events at Talladega this year saw qualifying speeds exceeding 200, posted by none other than Cale Yarborough himself, meaning all 3 of the fastest qualifying speeds that year belonged to him. His car was the fastest NASCAR had ever seen. But there was a rising star behind Yarborough, that being Mr. Popular, Bill Elliott. Bill Elliott entered the 1985 Cup Series with vengeance, immediately snatching the Daytona 500 for an astounding total of 138 laps led, while breaking the 205-mile-per-hour barrier during qualifying at 205.114 miles per hour. Sure, Cale Yarborough was fast, but Elliott was faster. Much, much faster. Bill Elliott would post a 209.398 mile-per-hour qualifying lap at the Winston 500 at Talladega. NASCAR was coming dangerously close to the 210 mile-per-hour mark. Elliott would once again one-up Cale Yarborough by claiming every single 200 mile-per-hour plus qualifying lap at Daytona and Talladega that season. But Elliott wasn't even close to being finished. No. He was going to get that 210 mile-per-hour mark. The year started off back at the Daytona 500, where Bill Elliott would once again post another 205 mile-per-hour lap time to win pole, but lost due to engine problems and an accident that had caused him to finish outside the top 10. And our good friend Dick Trickle also ran in this race. Cale Yarborough would come back and win pole at the Pepsi Firecracker 400 with a qualifying speed of 203.519 miles per hour, once again proving that his car was a force to be reckoned with. But Elliott ultimately won the speed battle this year with another 209 mile-per-hour qualifying lap at Talladega. Hang on a second. I feel like I'm missing something.
They're the hunted, 212 miles per hour.
Bill Elliott would qualify for the 1986 Winston 500 at an astounding 212.229 miles per hour. It was becoming clear that Elliott's car was no doubt the fastest car of NASCAR's speed era, as he became the first person to break the 210 mile per hour barrier. Scary fast is what I can use to describe his car, as his pole speeds were reaching those of IndyCar that year, and it was only a matter of time before something bad would happen. And so, we have reached our final year of the era of speed. And a packed year it was. Bill Elliott became the first and only person in NASCAR history to complete a lap around Daytona at over 210 miles per hour, and ended up leading more than half the race for his last Daytona 500 win. While this feat was certainly impressive, the next super speedway race would cast a shadow onto NASCAR never before seen. The 1987 Winston 500 was the pinnacle of NASCAR's speed. Bill Elliott would come the closest he would ever to 213 miles per hour at a blistering 212.809 miles per hour. Not only this, but 7 other drivers would contend with speeds over 210 miles per hour. This ended up being a recipe for disaster. At this point, teams had been slowly inching closer to the limits of what a stock car could handle. It turns out, a car with the aerodynamics of a soap bar tends to have issues at over 210 miles per hour, but that's all they could do if they wanted to compete with Bill Elliott. The most fatal flaw of NASCARs of this era was the fact that they were tailored for downforce at high speeds. This meant that getting spun sideways made cars lift suddenly, causing some of the most horrific accidents in NASCAR history. And on this fateful day of May 3rd, 1987, disaster would strike.
Who has a lot of sentiment among veteran observers as one of the real threats.
Oh, we have a problem.
Is blowing a tire.
Bobby Allison with a horrible crash here on the front stretch. It has torn out a complete section.
After just over 20 laps of the event, Bobby Allison would suffer an engine failure at over 210 miles per hour, causing debris to cut his tire. This threw his car sideways, causing it to lift into the air and crash into the catch fence just feet away from the crowd. Allison's car would spin and come to rest on the front stretch just before turn 1. This crash was a grim reminder of how close these cars were to the absolute limit. After this race, speeds would drastically fall from over 210 at both Daytona and Talladega to hovering around the 200 mile per hour mark. NASCAR would require all cars in the Winston Cup Series to be fitted with restrictor plates for the 1988 season, effectively limiting the cars to between 190 and 200 miles per hour on the super speedways. And this is where the era of speed ends. Now, what ended up happening to the era of speed? Well, ironically, speed is what caused the end of the era of speed. Safety in NASCAR wasn't the greatest. Sure, they had roll cages to protect drivers from rolling, but they had no safety features for cars going airborne. It was incredibly dangerous racing. NASCAR was well aware of the speeds ever climbing, and Bobby Allison's crash ended up being the reason why they fully implemented the restrictor plate. Something I didn't mention before that I will mention now is that NASCAR had already experimented with restrictor plates in the past, something that many people don't consider when discussing restrictor plate technology. But in total, it shows us that no matter how fast you are, there is almost always a dark, dangerous shadow following close behind.